Hi, I'm Pastor Kurt, and this is your 5-minute Bible study. Today, we're going to be looking at Mark chapter 1, verses 1 through 8. This is the very beginning of the Gospel of Mark. The very first verse in this Gospel is worth really paying attention to. It says, "This is the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God." Then it launches us into the story of John the Baptist and Jesus' baptism, and we're off. One thing to notice right away is there's no birth story here. That Christmas story that we all know, it comes from Luke. We get a little bit from the Gospel of Matthew, but none of it comes from the Gospel of Mark. This Gospel writer just lets us off, and here we go. This Gospel writer's favorite word is immediately. It shows up a lot in the Gospel of Mark. This Gospel writer is always in a rush. Things are moving really, really fast in the Gospel of Mark. And we see it happen even right here at the beginning. It's boom, out of the gate, the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and off we go with John the Baptist. Now, aside from noticing that there's no birth story, we need to think about what is the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ. Is it just that first verse, almost as if this is like the little introduction, like the opening scroll for a Star Wars movie, right? That kind of sets the stage for what's to come? Is it these first 8 verses before we really hear about John and then Jesus' baptism and Jesus' ministry? Or perhaps this first verse could almost act as a title of the entire book. Meaning, perhaps the entire Gospel of Mark itself is simply the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. That would mean that the story doesn't end when the Gospel ends. This Gospel story is simply the beginning of telling the story of Jesus. This first line is worth thinking about in comparison to how this Gospel ends. When we look at the end of the Gospel of Mark in chapter 16, we'll notice a few different things going on. There are 3 endings to the Gospel of Mark. There's the original ending at 16 verse 8, then there's a shorter ending, and then there's a longer ending. In 16:8, we hear that the women ran away from the tomb scared and frightened and didn't say a word to anybody. Well, then years later, people realize they had to tell people about Jesus because we're still talking about him today. So these other 2 endings, the shorter ending and the longer ending, got tacked on later. They weren't in the original text. But think about the women running away in terror and amazement and not saying a word to anybody. It's kind of like the book ends kind of ... or almost like to be continued, and then we wonder, okay, where's the sequel? But think about it. Perhaps the entire Gospel of Mark is simply the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. That means the story then continues in our lives today. Think about in your own life how many times you have experienced new beginnings. Everything that has led up to your life before that point is simply the beginning. Then it all leads up to this moment, and then you go on from there. Then the story continues, right? It's not like your story ends at that moment. It just changes. That's what happens when we have these big moments in our life. Our lives change. When we read the Gospel of Mark with its quick pace and immediately this and immediately that, and how it gets off running right at the beginning with the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, maybe that line helps us think about how even though the gospel text ends, the story itself continues in our lives today. The story just changes. So now God works through us to tell the story of Jesus to others. There's your 5-minute Bible study for the day. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.